Hey, what is going on, YouTube? I'm sorry, I'm like insanely slow with this. I'm so bad, but I'm getting better. Yeah, what's going on? So we're doing this is the second stream. This is the second time I've done this. The first time um basically I was just producing. So I was just basically testing out if the settings. Let me see here. So I'm trying to change the settings on the stream, and we might have issues today. I'm not sure. Um, this is my second only stream I've ever done. So the first time the settings were okay, but the latency was insane. So I'm not really sure if, people ask questions and I'm not sure if I'm seeing them in time, and I want people to know that I'm here. Um, but let's see what happens today. I'm gonna try my best. I just had the stream just crashed just now, so yeah, if you notice anything like funky going on, let me know in the chat. And yeah, I think it's looking okay, but I did change a couple of things, so we'll see what happens. All right, so anyway, yeah, today is pretty cool. Today we are. Um, I think last time I was really just testing things out with the YouTube streaming, so I was just basically making a beat. I didn't even have a cam. Um, but the title is like melody writing masterclass. Just super pretentious, but um, I call it that because what I wanted to cover today, and I keep checking back to like I feel like I'm gonna crash again, like I just did now, but we'll see what happens. It's all good. It might crash, and I'll just start talking and then not even know it, but if that happens, that's all right. Um, So I called it masterclass because I want to do something a little different than just making music. Like I like making music live. I think it's fun, especially if people add stuff like they want to collaborate or give feedback or anything like that. But um, I wanted to do sort of like a lesson where we go through. If you have questions, you ask them, and we literally just cover a bunch of stuff. I'm gonna see how much I can do today because I'm a little bit tired. I worked all day today, but um, I want to try and run through. I call it a masterclass because I feel like in one sitting I could give someone like the whole lowdown on how I do melodies, especially if you're not a keyboard player or you have trouble with melodies and you're trying to make music, and you like some parts of your music, but other parts you're like, I don't know, my melodies are kind of whack. I don't really know. I have private students in music production. That's a very common thing. They'll make a beat and they're like, yeah, it's all right. I like the drums, but the music part isn't too great. So I try to kind of find ways to explain things. This lesson is I'm going to try and be as accessible as possible, but we're going to like go into it. Like I want today to be like we're going to go into a bunch of stuff and really lay down a lot of my own ideas, tricks, perspectives, tips, whatever, like all of that stuff. So here I'm just checking my settings again. And yeah, it just looks like the latency is really bad. But I don't know if it's because my monitor, like in my YouTube monitor screen, is just late. So, you know, if you guys have a question, just ask it, and hopefully I'm sort of on your time, but we'll see. So let's get right into it. So the first thing is like when you start to understand melody writing, there's some really cool things about it. Um, the more you learn about music theory and chords and structures, the more you understand a lot about styles of music, even specific artists. So, in a nutshell, and I've done like YouTube shorts on this stuff where I've shown like here's a great progression for R&B, here's a great progression for lo-fi hip hop, here's something that sounds good with trap, here's something that sounds good in pop. And there's chord progressions are an awesome starting point. When I say melodies, I'm not necessarily talking about the traditional melody in, orchestral writing and everything. I'm talking about kind of a slang term for just the music loop that we do when we're beat making or making tracks. So you could just as easily call it like music instead of melody, right? Just music. How do we make music, not just beats, not just rhythm or drums, right? So there's tips to that. One that I ran into, I've been doing some more hip hop on the channel. So I started like lo-fi hip hop. I do trap and R&B as well, and I want to do more pop and EDM as well. But one of them is just knowing some of the most common chord progressions that are out there, and one in particular is related to trap and hip hop, and I call it the 1-flat-2. So I've got my piano here. Let me just check and make sure we got sound. I'm trying not to be super amateur about this. It's going to happen though. So you could probably hear that. It's kind of low in my headphones. That's just C minor chord. And the next stream, I'm going to try to have it so I have my piano visualizer. But we'll get there. This is the second all-time stream, so I'm trying to make this decent, but it's probably not going to be. So there's a C minor chord. I'm just playing on the Midi keyboard below the desk. Now right there is a flat 2 chord. So I have C minor. You know what I could do? Let me go ahead and just pull up a Midi clip. Nice. So this actually is not the worst way to do things. So there's my C minor chord, right? Got C, E flat, G. All right. Flat 2 is a way of saying a minor 2, which is an interval. Intervals are just distance. And it's a pretty simple amount of distance. It's one semitone, so just go up one note. There's a D flat. I'm going to play a major triad there. So you have D flat, F, and A flat. All right, so those two triads side by side that's one progression, that's one trick, that's one key to all of this, right? And like I said before, you learn progressions as you train your ear to hear these things. You're going to hear it everywhere. I mentioned this one in particular because I've done a lot of trap and hip hop recently, and it's like Travis Scott. There's like multiple Travis Scott songs that use this movement. You could go like, I guarantee, go to Spotify hip hop play, like the top hip hop songs right now in the US. You'll find this progression in like the first 20 songs. Now, how they play it, also drill, like drill uses it all the time. But if I play a C minor pentatonic scale over that, let's just record something too so we can get this on the screen. Let's see what we got here. All right, there's something. We're just getting started. I'm going to try to go as best as I can today, but like I said, I'm pretty tired. I worked all day today, so like I was going to do this stream tomorrow, but I just thought, you know what? Let's just try it. Let's just have some fun. So I'm going to quantize this. I'm going to like pretend we wrote this in by hand, right? So, because a lot of this comes in handy for people that don't play piano, or you play a little piano, but you're still trying to learn more. I'm not really a piano player. I can play a little bit of stuff, but I'm not really like a professional piano player by any means. But what I'm going to do here is just show you. For a lot of people, this is like a starting point. You know, they arpeggiate something and they write it in by hand. If I go over here, I'm just going to grab some drums too. Let's see. I put out a tutorial on trap and hip hop. It's geared towards Ableton, but that it doesn't matter. There's a free sample pack that comes with it, and I'm just gonna use that because the drums are pretty cool in there. Let's see if I can find it here. It's a bunch of stuff. This one. Okay. Okay, so we have. I kind of just want the drums though. This is in the free pack, by the way, so you can get this. Link is in the description. Okay. I don't want the melody here. All right. So cool. So now we've got something. This progression is all over the place. Trap, hip hop, all the time. You'll hear it in a lot of songs. And as long as you understand that, like, okay, 1 flat 2, that means that whatever my 1 chord is, it doesn't have to be C minor, it could be A minor. Right? I'm playing that idea in the key of A minor or F minor. E minor. See, it's all like the same stuff. Like, it's just different keys. So when you hear me say 1 flat 2, I'm using the number system, which is kind of like it's a nomenclature for chord progressions, basically. If that's new to you, I definitely recommend diving into the theory behind that. And it's really not a super complicated topic. And because this is a stream, I'm going to take my time. I'd love to go into that real quick so that you guys have that under your belt if that's new to you. Because to a lot of people it is. But I will tell you, like, and I like streams for this reason, because if people are interested, my honest feeling is that this is like the biggest piece of music theory that you actually have to learn is inside this stuff. This is like, people talk about music theory, like this is honestly the biggest part of it. Oh, so we're having some issues with the stream. Okay. So that's causing some issues. Okay, so the stream is not doing too good. I might have to relaunch it. I'm not sure. Let me see. I had a feeling we were going to have trouble today. I don't know if I can do it while I'm live. Let me see. I changed my FPS, so that might be why this is happening. I knew when I changed it, I was like, oh, this might not be good. This might be bad. Okay, my FPS is back here. I'm changing back to 60, and I'm going to change this to... I'm sorry, guys. This is definitely this is Bush League, but I'm trying. I can't change my buffer rate. I changed my frame rate, so let's see if we can keep going. And I know the logo is probably on my face, so the YouTube logo. So yeah, it looks terrible. All right, let me move this up then. This is a bad one. I think when you guys get the VOD, you can just skip through all this crap. Like, don't worry about it. I'm going to get better at this, I promise. I'm going to go up here. Bird's eye view. All right. Okay. I think that's fine. Yeah. And by the way, if you're in the comments, just feel free to leave a comment if you notice something. It's probably not good, the settings that I have. So it's a process. We'll get there. When I do the VOD, I might even like re-edit the VOD and then put a chapter selection on the bottom of the screen so you can just skip through all this stuff. And we'll make highlights or something. We could do that with the streams. That actually might be better, just for everyone's sake. Yeah, I think I just have really crazy latency. So we'll see. That could be just the YouTube screen, but we'll see what's up. Yeah, it seems like we're having some issues with that. So I might have to restart, to be honest. So I'm just going to restart. I don't think I have to restart the YouTube stream. I just have to restart the software, and then I'm going to change my buffer rate. I think it was fine last time. I just didn't want to have to deal with latency. So all right, let's see how that goes. I just reset everything. And, spoiler alert, I don't know what I'm doing. But we'll figure it out. This is not going to be a great stream. This is going to be pretty amateur hour, but hopefully you guys understand. All right, I'm going to try and just like barrel through here. All right, so number system, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm writing out the notes of the C minor scale. So those are the notes that I'm playing on the keyboard. That's what you hear, right? So you have 7 unique notes. That's a natural minor scale. If I took every single note of that scale and built chords off of itself, right? So I want to build a C minor triad. I take C, I take its third, which is E flat, I take its fifth, which is G. That's naturally going to create a C minor chord. Same thing for D. I take D, that's my root. F is the third to D. The fifth would be A flat. That's going to naturally create a D diminished triad. I take the E flat, G, B flat, E flat major. So you have naturally occurring types of chords based on what they're creating from. Every note comes from the scale. That's why you'll hear people say diatonic. If we keep going along this idea, you're left with a pattern of major, minor, and one diminished chord. So this is what people mean by diatonic. Now, if you're using number system, it's kind of like a shorthand, like a nomenclature for chord progressions. And I might be wrong about like the one that I use, but I use basically C minor. Oh, we got more issues. Current keyframe frequency is 8.3 seconds. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Okay. I'm sorry I'm resetting the stream. Well, I'm kind of trying different settings right now, so I probably shouldn't have touched them, to be honest. It's not good, but we'll figure it out. Okay, so we have a C natural minor scale here, right? So the number system is a way of describing the chords that come naturally from that scale. And that's why when you're practicing instruments or you're learning about music or you're training your ear can start to recognize chord movements. And this is why a lot of people might be able to hear a song on the radio, like while they're driving, and they'll already know what the chords are. They might not know the key, right? They might not have perfect pitch, like they can hear the exact tone that they're hearing, but they recognize the chord movement. And the chord movement I'm playing here is one flat two. And it's super common in trap and hip hop and other genres too. So why do I call it one flat two? So I can use numbers to denote, remember it's like shorthand, right? That's denoting the chord. And in our particular case, when I'm using this for the natural minor scale, I might, kind of describe it like this. So flat 3 major, flat 6 major, flat 7 major. I'm not saying that all this stuff is like you're going to find all of this in a textbook necessarily, but when I'm around musicians, this is how a lot of people use the number system. And people can disagree, like people might name it a different way or something, but the most important thing is this is a shorthand, right? This is like a nomenclature. So if I say one flat 2 major or just one flat 2, what I'm talking about is C minor to a D flat major chord. Okay, so that's a super, super common chord progression. And that's why it just sounds good with this beat. And that sounds pretty cool. I mean, that's just like a stock piano, a super simple arpeggiation, goes up, comes down, goes up, comes down. There's not a lot to it. You'll hear a lot of songs that are using this move. And this video or this stream, I want to cover a bunch of stuff. My feeling is, as a musician, if this makes sense to you, right? Like if this is something that you're okay with, you want to take it further and further and further. You want to go and say, what else is possible, right? And this is where music theory is not like just an academic exercise. It's practical. It's like having a map and you know where to go, or you turn the lights on in the room, you're no longer bumping around in the dark. A lot of times in melody writing, people, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like if you want to grab the mouse tool and you want to click around, we could do this in FL, by the way. If anyone wants to see me do this in FL, just let me know in the chat. And like, we can do all this stuff. We can like just build it, inside there. There's nothing wrong with that. But, and of course in Ableton FL, you have the scale highlighting feature. So I could go to C minor. You can see I'm lighting up the notes of the scale that we described earlier. So it's all right there. And that can really help. If in FL, you use a scale stamp. You just put it on an empty sampler track and have that in the background, like in the opaque piano roll view in FL Studio. I should probably pull up FL. I will. So you can write it in by hand. There's nothing wrong with that. But I always try to get people going with the number system and with like, hey, here's some theory. Here's an idea. Because we can take this further and further and further. So I've done a lot of videos on lo-fi hip hop. Lo-fi hip hop, like everyone knows, you can incorporate any genre, indie rock, R&B, like anything, right? I love R&B and jazz because we use these chords, but let me zoom in a little more, but we extend them. So everything that you see here is like where that all came from, right? But like I'm extending the chords, so I'm adding on another interval. Everyone says, all right, you build a chord with root, third, fifth. Well, you can build a chord with root, third, fifth, add the seventh. What happens when I add the 7? Well, I still have an F minor chord, but now it's an F minor 7 chord, G minor 7. As soon as you add that 7th, you now have a little more information about the scale. This is the natural minor scale. So some people that have some music theory background know that this is also really a major scale. We're just looking at it from a different angle, but not going to confuse. Try not to confuse anyone. I'm just extending the chords, right? So I'm just extending. I'm extending. I can go further. I could say, oh, let's make it a minor 9 chord. You could have a C minor 11. What do all these numbers mean? It's just extending that chord further and further. There's my 7th. There's my 9. There's my 11. C minor 11. So it's a big, thick chord, right? And that's where that sound comes from. So when you hear me playing something kind of jazzy, and I can do the same thing with the flat 9 chord. So I could have D flat major 7. So I'm trying to kind of make everything parallel so you can see all the theory in front of you. You can take this idea further and further and further. And if you add on those higher intervals, it's going to sound jazzier. But for hip hop, that's not a bad thing. Like a lot of the Trippie Redd stuff, the chords are like a big synth sound, but it's like a 7th chords and 9 chords and 11 chords, big stacked extensions, extended voicings. And that's how they're getting that sound. So some people might know Trippie Redd, right? So, and there's tons of other examples too, if you don't like Trippie Redd. So like, here's like a synth, right? It's a little too reverby. Just grab something kind of simple sounding. Interesting but simple. cheesy sound, but you get the idea. Just trying to grab something that's just not like a super dry piano. So everything you're hearing is 1 flat 2, 1 flat 2, 1 flat 2. You know, I'm not going to say it's like the most amazing ideas, but just to kind of get your imagination going. So you get some interesting sounds, right? That's an example of melody writing, how you can build your own understanding and kind of take it from there. Let's see. There's a bunch of stuff that you can do with this once you kind of get the basics down. So, all right, so we've kind of like, now we've got some interesting stuff here we can build off of. One of those things is understanding that if I take this scale, right? So this is you're looking at a natural minor scale. And if I take that scale and I add a flat 2, I don't have a natural minor scale anymore. I have a different scale. In fact, I have a mode. So people say like, what's a mode? What's a mode? A mode is a scale. A scale can't always necessarily be a mode, but any mode is just another scale. So if we take this thing, because we're talking about the flat 2, right? This becomes Phrygian. It's a mode that comes from the major scale, and it naturally creates diatonic, right? It creates that chord. So you have that sound there in those two chords. So that gives you a lot of ideas. If you're in Ableton, right? So we go over here. You can see Phrygian, it's right there, right? So if I click that, now all of a sudden D flat is highlighted, not D natural, right? And everything now works kind of better in my color. So you can see this is designed to be, you know, something you can use. This is something you can use. What else? So yeah, now we have Phrygian. And if I was to take just basic chords, right? So maybe we'll keep this. I'm just going to make another track. And I apologize if I'm slow. To be honest, talking and producing, I'm a little bit slower. So I'm going to try my best. It's kind of like when you're talking, it's like multitasking, right? We're never going to be good at it. So I'm give it my best shot. I'm going to put a stock piano on here. It's not a stock piano. It's a Alicia's Keys and Contact. Great piano. And I'm going to have this going. So also the sound of the piano is a little darker, a little more mellow, right, than that bright synth. So I'll use the synth to create a melody. All right, how do we create a melody? Well, a melody can go over this arpeggiation. I'm just going to improvise something, but I'm going to use, right, I'm going to use the Phrygian mode. So that has its own notes, right? So what are the notes? We have C, we have D flat, we have E flat, and all the rest of the notes of the C natural minor scale, A flat, B flat at the end. All right. So those are our notes, right? And then you have your chords. You can look up any chord sequence for almost any scale. One of my all-time favorite tricks. It's an old website. allguitarchords.com. all-guitar-chords.com. This is crazy. So scales to chord. They put up these like weird ads now. But see how do I get out of this? Okay. Scales to chord. So now we look underneath here and we look around. Oh, Phrygian, right? C Phrygian. Now in blue are all the diatonic chords that come from Phrygian. If I play on them and hit this button up here, we're traveling up the Phrygian scale and chords. Back in the day, you used to not have to hit the speaker button. I don't know why they changed it. They made it much worse because back in the day, when I was like 15, I would sit here and just click around and I would get so many song ideas just by like clicking around this little grid. It looked different too back then. And as soon as you click the blue, it would play the chord. They got rid of that. I don't know. They kind of messed it up, to be honest. But you can still hear the chords in that scale. And that's awesome, right? Because you could start to come up with ideas. If you don't mind clicking, if you got a mouse, you can click fast. You could chain the chords together, hear the chord movement, and it'll give you a song idea. This is just kind of, they made this more geared for guitar players, but that's really useful. At least you can write them down, right? I used to do this all the time. You experiment, and it's great when you have the chord background. So when you go into the piano roll, if you're not playing keyboards or you're just still learning keyboards, that's a challenge, right? So if I go in, I'm going to use all the notes from the Phrygian scale or Phrygian mode over that progression, right? So I'm going to have C. That's a little high. So that's Phrygian. So we'll just jam. You get the idea. I was just kind of jamming in the progression with the scale, trying to show you all the notes of the scale, even past 2 octaves. Some of you might have heard I also threw in a D natural there, which I can get away with when I'm hearing the C minor chord in the background. If I hit the D natural over the D flat major chord, there's a clash there. D flat next to D natural. Probably one of like the most obvious things you'll find in music is sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that's a big no-no. So the half step. The half step is super important in music. There's some scales like pentatonic scales, they don't have any half steps. So you have different kinds of leeway or different things happen with a pentatonic scale. Some of you might have heard of a pentatonic scale. I played pentatonic scales on the guitar for years. I never knew that there were no half steps in it until one day a composer pointed it out to me when I was in school, and I was like, that's right. So half steps, you're going to find that a lot. The more you get into like the notes that you're using and what they mean, there's like tricks, there's secrets, there's little patterns that you'll pick up on. Half steps are important, whether you use them or you avoid them. I can use D natural even though the Phrygian scale uses D flat. It just depends where I use it in the music, right? So these are all ideas you're gonna start to get more things about. I hope this is like making sense so far. I'm trying to I'm trying to chain together a few ideas and give like an overview. And my hope is that this inspires someone watching at any point in time to just jump into their DAW and be like, I'm going to try that. That's the idea. So if you're out there in the YouTube universe, feel free to pause the video and jump into your own thing. All right, let's keep going. So we got the Phrygian thing going, and this is an idea. Like this is kind of like a hypothetical thing, right? But let's just run with it. Who cares? Okay, I've got like a melody. Is it a great melody? Who cares? Just making music. A lot of times where I hear a sound where the tone is very, I thought I crashed again. Every time I hear a sound where the tone is very like kind of clear, I like to kind of muddy it up. So there's different things I'll go to for that. This thing is amazing. I got this thing for free. I don't know if anyone remembers this thing. This is Arturia. And I think during like the holiday season, they give this away for free. It's crazy. I basically use it as like a filter. So I just take some of the top off. It does add a little bit of that like flutter, like that warble sound, which is great. And you can go crazy with it. So that's pretty cool. And then we can just wash it out a little bit. All right. So now I'm going to turn off this scale highlight so you can see what's going on, right? Over this area is C minor. Over this area is D flat major. And, or C sharp. So I think I can change that in the settings, make it have flats instead of sharps. But so, okay, cool. I'm using my D flat and my E flat. That's the minor third of the scale. Super important note is that the thirds of any scale or chord are like the secret note for a lot of reasons. So yeah, this is like an example using the Phrygian mode, and it's going to give your sound a different color. I use the word color all the time because like color is a big part of music too. Sounds like an abstract word, but when you get into like composition and sound design, it's really useful. It's really helpful to use it. So, yeah. So Phrygian gives you kind of a mysterious, darker color. It's very moody. It can also be smooth, and it's used a lot in popular genres all the time. So this is just an example of that. And I could do probably a stream where we literally just make melodies in Phrygian. But I did want to jump around because we could take this idea and like literally just go crazy. Like I'm just going to turn off some plugins so I don't blow up my computer. But yeah, hopefully my stream is still working. I don't know. I'm trying not to blow up the system here. It might be totally fine. It's just crazy latency on the YouTube prompt. I don't know. We'll find out. But you can use other modes. So, we talk about modes having color. There's other modes out there and they sound different. And this is where the creativity comes in. Like the theory is not just an academic exercise. It's something that will allow you to create more music. and be excited about the music you're creating and not feel like you're hitting brick walls, right? So this is Mixolydian. This is literally a C major scale, but has a B flat. So it has a minor seventh or a dominant seventh at the top. So by flattening it, you have this sequence here. This produces a whole other set of chords. So you're going to naturally have a C major triad, right? You're going to naturally have a D minor triad. Remember, we're kind of building from just the notes that come from its respective scale, diatonic. Hear that word a lot. I'm going to have an E diminished chord here. Then I'm going to have an F major. And this is the cool part. You're going to have a G minor chord because of that B flat. That's the third to G. That's a minor third. So we could probably do a whole thing on like, you know, intervals and what we're talking about with intervals. If this sounds a little bit like gibberish, it's because it basically is. Like music theory, when you say intervals, they're just names. So a major third, a minor third, what's the difference? It's a semitone difference, but if it feels like another language, it's because it kind of is. It's its own little language. And if it's stressing you out, don't worry about it. Just follow along with, here's a scale. These chords come from that scale. That's it. And as long as you can build a triad with your mouse, you don't even have to play or have a MIDI keyboard. You can make it happen. You can make something with this stuff. So you have C, D minor, E diminished, F, G minor, A minor, B flat. Mixolydian is used a ton in like rock, Americana, folk, pop, but especially in like rock and like country music and Americana music. It's all over the place. The reason why, you'll see people go from a C major chord to a B flat major chord, right? That's the chords that naturally come from that mode, Mixolydian mode. So then all of a sudden you just ask questions. You're like, well, what would it be like if I just took that vibe and I just ran with it, right? So now we don't have a C minor chord. We got C major going to B flat major. So here's like a Mixolydian chord progression. I think that's like a Lana Del Rey song. She uses Mixolydian. That might be like Norman Rockwell. Something like that, right? So pop uses it. Singer-songwriter. Notice this is like very... It's like introspective and kind of cool. And something cool happens if I hit an E over that B flat major chord. I'm not even going to call that what it is because I don't want to confuse people, but it sounds cool. Someday we'll get into that. And I know there's some people watching that like, or that will watch this VOD. They'll be like, I know what you mean. I know what this is. That's cool. I just sometimes when I'm describing anything theory, like I gotta be kind of just not be too literal. Because like some people could say, they could be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just making it happen. Like that wasn't for me. When I went on piano. When I got on the piano, I didn't know what I was doing. And everything that I can do now was from practice. And not just practice, but rote practice over and over and over again. I don't have a natural touch or anything. It's not magic for me. So when I describe it to people, I'm trying to make it so if it's not magic for you, it's okay. You're not expected to be like magical talent person. It's just there. And you can try it. Just try playing the chords on your keyboard if you're playing keyboard with me. C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat. And one of like the all-time greatest ways to practice piano, by the way, is to be able to play not just the scale, but the chords in scale form, and then start playing chord progressions solo with the right hand. And then you're doing what I'm doing right now. My right hand is just moving around. The scale is my left hand, expresses chord movement. And then over the creativity is like you could do this over a trap beat, a pop beat, whatever. It's just gonna give you a different vibe, a different color, a different feel. So yeah, whatever. Let's just jump in. So we got a feel right now, right? It's not an amazing idea. It's just something, you know. We're just making music. This feels more like singer-songwriter, like more kind of pop. Think of like Heat Waves. Remember that song Heat Waves? I wouldn't be surprised if like maybe there's a Mixolydian thing going on in that song. I don't know the key or anything. I don't know the chords to the song, but it reminds me of Heat Waves. Like pop. But really like awesome drums. Hip hop and trap have the best drums, right? So different feel. Okay, melody. We're just doing it again. It's just a different scale. So I know I gotta have not an E flat. I need E natural. I know I gotta have not B natural, B flat. Okay. So let's just see what happens. It's just something, you know. I'm just gonna turn on some effects, just make that a little more. Wash it out. I kind of like this. It's super cringy to like your own music, I know. I'm just kidding. So there you go, a different scale, a different vibe. You could, I mean, dude, you could go so far with this. You could try every kind of mode. You could try every kind of scale. You're gonna discover way more things than I know. Like a lot of stuff that I know is just from the stuff that I like, and I've stuck to it for years. And I've learned a lot of songs teaching guitar students, you know, teaching guitar for 10 years, man. So, I mean, I've learned how to play every song on guitar, literally every song, every genre you can think of. And these chord progressions, they pop up all the time, all the time. It's crazy. And it's the same chord progressions. Unless you're learning like a classic rock riff, you're learning how to play Black Dog, you're learning how to play some kind of Muse thing or Tool or whatever. I don't know. But I'm telling you, commercial music, we're already digging deeper into the bag, just doing modes. Most of the time, it's major scale. Major scale, the relative minor scale is built into that scale. We started with natural minor, right? That's the relative minor to major scale. They use the same exact notes. So I'm giving you hopefully something to inspire you. Hopefully it makes some kind of sense. It is a theory approach, but we're taking those steps, right? We want to know what's possible. I'm showing you also my favorites. There's other scales out there. There's other modes out there. Harmonic minor. If you want to, check it out. Check out harmonic minor. Tons of stuff in there. It's crazy. If you're into drill music, you gotta learn the harmonic minor scale. It's the reason why all that stuff sounds so cool. Harmonic minor scales used in like classical music for hundreds of years. It's a beautiful scale, super dark and mysterious and dramatic. Works amazing in drill. So many drill songs are just using that scale. If you learn the scale, you're gonna have your own melodies. You're gonna know how to make your own melodies. And then another one I like is Dorian. So I come from like a rock background. Like I grew up listening to like records in the 60s and whatnot, like my dad's records. So like psychedelic rock is using Dorian all the time. If you listen to The Doors, you know, listen to all that stuff, like the guy in the guitar is playing the Dorian minor scale. It's the second mode of the major scale. If we build it from C, we're going to have C, D, E flat, F, G, A natural. That's where it deviates from the natural minor scale, and it still has the B flat. So this is another cool scale. This scale is like rock, jazz, blues, funk, fusion. Now, does it have to be there? No, I mean it could be in any genre, but it just shows up all the time in those tracks, right? So you've got this kind of thing, and if you hear someone go to like an F7 after that C minor, that's that vibe, and you got that A natural in there, and it's going to really give it that Dorian sound. Excuse me. So what I'll do here, so I'll have the chords right here. I'm just going to grab a second piano, and then I'll just play over it. On the wrong piano, sorry. Ah. If you ever listen to like lo-fi hip hop, it's often that, right? Because it's like coming from jazz and blues. So that's where this stuff comes from. And it works really nice also, if anyone's ever heard of vaporwave, which is like kind of, it's an awesome genre. I'd love to do like a video on it, but check out vaporwave playlists on YouTube. It's some of the best music to like study or write to, doing your homework or whatever you're doing. It's super chill. It's very like lo-fi. But it has like elements of synthwave, and it also has a little bit of what I call like the elevator music appeal. So this is kind of smooth and fusion-y sounding, and like that's the elevator thing. I apologize for all my made up terms, but it's part of the deal when you're learning music theory from me, I guess. So this is like the elevator. Or when they put you on hold, you know, when you're trying to figure out your taxes. And that sound you hear is me playing in the background. Yeah, so that's Dorian. It's a really cool scale. It's a really beautiful scale. Oh my gosh, if you learn like, dude, if you get into some of the Stevie Wonder stuff, I mean, don't sleep on this scale. This scale, I'm playing it cheesy right now because I'm just being cheesy. This scale is so slick. It is so cool, and that's the most basic vanilla chord progression I could possibly think of. C minor F7, or 1/4. The blues is 1/4, 1/4/5, so that's why I'm throwing it in there. You're gonna run into it all the time like that, but this is a sick chord progression. This is a sick scale. So, yeah, you can kind of go crazy with this. Any scale, think of it like an artist when they paint, they put, the paints on their palette, Your scale is like your color, and it's going to give you all kinds of harmonic possibilities, right? So that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. And jazz and like fusion and all that kind of stuff, I joke around about it, but it's not that. Those genres are so important because a lot of you might have seen, like, you might have run into my channel if I did lo-fi hip hop or like R&B, or, check out these free sounds, whatever. All that stuff is like R&B, basically. Lo-fi hip hop and R&B, and you'll see on Spotify, I think they still call it bedroom pop. All that is like R&B, man. 251. So that's a beautiful chord progression, and Yeah, it's related to R&B, but it's in like every genre now. It's in pop everywhere. Um, and it's basically just like, hey, take the major scale and use our number system like we talked about, right? 251. So how does that shake out? So we'll go right in here, and I want to build a 251 major scale. I got to turn on my lights in a second. The sun's going down, but we'll get that later. I love the major scale because there's no sharps or flats. So it's like, it's just the alphabet. It's perfect. And these are the chords that naturally derive from the C major scale. Um, 251 is going to be D minor G7 C. So that's a 251. I'm playing it with some chord extensions like we talked about earlier, so we can extend everything that you see here. Sorry, I'm trying to do this fast. And you'll have the same stuff. Notice the G7 is the same because I was just kind of showing that earlier than I should have. But G7, the 5 chord is dominant. We can get into the 5 chord. I've done this in some tutorials, some shorts, some YouTube shorts too. But yeah, 251. So it just sounds nice. It's gonna give you a different vibe, and like a lot of time, I try to kind of be holistic. I kind of show you. I like to give the whole spill sometimes, and you take what you like and leave the rest, right? Lo-fi hip hop, you can get that sweet, romantic, melancholic sound from just a simple 251. It's the DNA of jazz music, man. It's the DNA. So there's a loop right there. And then I'll just like take this and put a bandpass on these drums. So basically I'm just taking stuff away. Actually, that was a crappy EQ move. Let's try. Hold on. I swear I know what I'm doing. I promise you. I don't know. We're kind of just doing something off the cuff here. That's all. It's not that serious. But it's fun too, because if you don't use an EQ, if you're just coming in the stream right now, this is it, man. This is EQ. Learn your music theory. Learn your music theory and get used to that EQ. It's your best friend. You can shape everything. Where am I? I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm in C major. I don't even know, man. I'm just playing the scale. Are these the greatest ideas in the world? No, not at all. But like, I don't know, I could vibe to this. I could fall asleep to this. You could put this on chilled cow. There you go. So there's lo-fi. Is it a great lo-fi song? Not really, but it's a vibe, right? How did I make that vibe? I just use my scale. I know kind of what that style is doing harmonically, and then I'm just picking out some sounds and I'm just making it happen. So, jump into it on your own. Open up your DAW while I'm talking here, mute me, and just go and do it. That's the whole idea. Or ask a question. Ask a question in the comments. We had some questions last time. I didn't even have cam on, so I was like, because I didn't even know if the stream was gonna work at all. So and then I would like see the question probably like 5 minutes after someone put it up. So I'm trying to be better at that. But ask questions. Um, I can pretty much do anything on stream except listen to other people's music. I imagine that's a big no-no on YouTube. So I can't really do that. But if you have a question about a song, I could mute the stream and listen to it and tell you what the chords are. Whatever. Whatever. You're going to use this stuff your own way. Let's just keep going though. So the next part of all this, right? We've used the scale and we've like been creating music with it. And then the next thing people say is they're like, all right, but not every song does that, right? Like songs can have kind of chords that don't follow one scale. And you might be kind of just clicking around. Excuse me. You might be clicking around with your mouse and you're going to find something where you're like, I don't know what scale this is. You might even kind of peer into it and be like, well, I'm not counting 7 unique notes. I'm counting 9 unique notes. What does that mean? Probably what it means is because you were writing in the melody with your mouse that you basically, and you didn't have scale map on FL or scale highlight on Ableton set up. I don't know if Pro Tools or Logic has a similar thing. I don't think they do. But because you didn't have those training wheels on, I'm not disparaging it, by the way. I'm just saying, because you didn't have those guidelines on, that you were picking out notes that just sounded cool, and you made a chord progression or a melody that wasn't diatonic, wasn't from one scale, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It happens all the time. It's more common now than ever in modern music, in commercial music, people, music that makes money. Music that's on the charts. R&B is a huge example of that because it's related to jazz, like we said. Jazz is like one of those things where, like, if you study jazz in school, I went to school, I studied jazz in college, right? So the number one thing you learn when you start learning a jazz standard is there's not really a key. There's more just movements. So you go pick up a chart for Satin Doll or even Autumn Leaves. There's 2-5-1s all over the place. We just made something with a 2-5-1, right? Go check out those jazz standards. Is there a key? It could change arguably from bar to bar. Honestly, it's more about movements. So that's why jazz is so intimidating. And lo-fi hip hop is a lot of fun because it kind of introduces you to jazz. We don't necessarily do crazy modulations unless people are making tracks where they've got that skill to play that way, or they're sampling from an actual piece of jazz music that has those kinds of chord movements. And that's why jazz is kind of weird because it's not in one scale, not in one key, not in one tonal center, I'll call it. I apologize, I'm making up terms again. But anyway, so that's what's going on. That's modulation. So if someone says like, oh, I'm modulating to this, I'm modulating to that, it's a real complicated sounded word. All that it's talking about is it's like, okay, we had one scale, but when I hit this chord did not come from that scale, right? So I like to make this practical though. I want to give it to you just straight practical stuff. We're going to go all the way back up. I know to some people just coming in, this is total gibberish. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to clean it up. This is natural minor scale. And people are like, well, how do I use modulation? How do I use that? It seems like there'd be like infinite ways to use it. Because there's infinite ways to like mix different scales together in a chord progression. Totally. One of the most obvious ways to do it though is if you're used to working in a particular scale, like the major scale or the minor scale, a typical scale, you could just take a minor chord and make it major, or take a minor chord and make it dominant. So take a C minor and you make it, take a C minor, or I'm sorry, an F minor, make it F7. Well, if I had a chord progression going from C minor to F7, we've technically already done that. Let's go down to Dorian. There's the Dorian scale right here. I should label these things. So here's Dorian. And we did that. So if your chord progression was like, oh, I'm in C minor. I go to A flat major 7, then I come back to C minor, and then I do a little F7, right? Well, right now, sounds like I'm in natural minor, but when I go to this chord, I'm kind of in Dorian world, because in the natural minor scale, it wouldn't be an F7, it would be an F minor. I modulated. And so that didn't sound like nonsense, right? That sounded like music, right? But I was modulating. So modulation is just taking the stuff we've talked about so far, and you're just taking it like a step further. It's getting super dark in here. But nah, all right. I don't look too creepy with the lights off. No, we're all right. If the lighting is weird, that's why I kind of made the box super small, so it doesn't matter. That's modulation. It happens all the time in like popular music. So like, man, there's so many songs. It's crazy. I don't know, like R&B, Kali Uchis has a song called Telepatia. It's a beautiful song. It's such a dreamy, cool vibe. And I did a song recently with a great artist. Her name's Rihanna Marr. And we did a song in that style. We didn't release it, but just for reasons. But it was really fun, because I would sit there and look at the progression and be like, why does it sound so, like, I love that chord progression. What's that sound? And I felt like I could hear that sound in other songs. Like there's a Post Malone song right now with Doja Cat. I think it's called I Like You. And it's like a certain kind of sound. When I hear the chords, I think very much in chords. I'm a chord kind of guy. And I'm like, what's that sound? What's that sound? It's the sound of modulation, where it's like there's a seventh chord instead of a minor chord. Telepatia, starts with a G major 7, and then instead of, we're in the key of D major, so instead of going to a B minor chord, which would be the sixth chord, to a D major key, they go to B7, right? And then they do that E minor 9, which is like the 2 chord to the D major scale, right? So what was different? We didn't play a B minor. We played a B7. We took the minor chord, we turned it into a 7 chord. We substitute it with a 7th chord, dominant 7th chord. Boom. That's such a big deal in this style. It's crazy. What I go to again? E minor 9. And then I think it does like a B minor over A, like a voicing for B minor. So then it goes back to B minor. So it did a B7, E minor 9, then like a B minor voicing. I forget what the voicing was. But like, that's it. Took a minor chord, made it dominant 7. So again, it's just following through on this idea of like, once you know the scale, you can break the scale. Once you know the rules, you can break the rules. And breaking the rules isn't going to give you random junk. It's going to give you other sounds. Or you could just stay totally diatonic. I got to turn the lights on. I will in a second. Or you could just stay totally diatonic, totally inside the scale. And R&B does that too. R&B, hip hop, pop, they do that as well. Pop music, loves to just stay in one scale. It doesn't try to throw you anything too out of left field. They don't, in pop music, it's like, we don't want the listener to be like, what's that? We don't want them to have, if they have a what's that like thing, it better be good, right? In pop music, that's kind of like the rule in like real music production. If you're trying to get a song placed for pop, it's like, don't try to be clever, you know, because you don't want the mainstream audience to be like, that's a weird chord. You have to be really careful about it. So is modulation as common in pop music? I mean, there's probably beautiful outliers, beautiful examples of yes, absolutely. But I mean, just go watch a great Rick Beato video where he rants about modern music. He would argue no. So actually, I don't know what he would argue. I don't know what he'd argue. He's a brilliant guy. But what was I saying? I don't know. My chat is broken, by the way. I don't know if my chat's working or not. Because I think like last time it kind of froze or something. I don't know. So feel free to ask questions. Because I'm just not seeing anything. I'm not sure. So I apologize for that if it's just not showing up on my my monitor. Because it is super laggy, the YouTube monitor. It's weird. Okay. So that's where all this stuff happens. Are you modulating or not? A lot of R&B does not modulate. So like, you know what? I'm even gonna just grab another sound here, and let's just turn this stuff off for a second. I'm gonna grab another synth, and let's see if we can just get like a really typical horn synth sound. Are there horns in here? Brass. Wow, these are really not what I'm looking for. Oh, that's all right. So this is The Weeknd. Die For You. Play it up here. Right? That's Die For You by The Weeknd. I'll probably get flagged, but who cares? Actually, that's not close enough. It's actually better that we have a sound that's like more corny sounding than the actual Die For You, just so we don't get the robots don't come after us. So we that was from the scale. And when I first heard that song, I was teaching it to a piano student, and like it's in the key of E major. And I know that even though there's no E major chord in that chord progression for the song, because as soon as I hear that, I'm thinking 4-3. So A major is the 4 chord, G sharp minor is the 3 chord, and then, oh wow, then it goes to C sharp minor. That's a nice, you could even say it's in the key of C sharp minor. That's a nice resolution to a minor chord. I know that's the 6th chord, and then it hits that F sharp minor right there, right? So, you know, and this is not to digress too much, but this is also why when I make sample packs, I'm very strict about my diatonic rules. So I make sure that the sample pack, when you get a loop in one of my sample packs, it's actually the real key it's in. Because I know it sounds like a rant, but like, I'm not going to name names, but I would say a good 70% of the loops that I've used from other sample packs over the years, they just were not labeled correctly. It wasn't the actual key. I'm not even really sure what, I would assume the people that make those loops know what the key of the song is in. or the key of the progression is in, but they might be using like just the first chord of that sequence. Or maybe they don't. Maybe people that make sample packs don't really know these rules that well themselves. They just pick a chord out from that progression and say it's in that key. But a lot of those samples will lie to you. So you'll be dragging, dropping it into Logic. You might have your session tuned to a certain key, or you might be throwing it into FL or Ableton and trying to retune it using the pitch change to make it fit your track, or you're trying to follow it if you're starting with that loop and it's like throwing you all off. I only say all this stuff because I've seen it with so many of my own private students. And the reason why is because it's not labeled correctly. If I look at Die For You by The Weeknd, I'm going to say it's E major or C sharp minor. Probably C sharp minor because it feels like it resolves to that C sharp minor chord. Because when I know someone uses it, if they use one of my samples, I want them to be able, if they know the theory, to not get messed up. So yeah, I digress. I'm sorry about that. But that's where all that's coming from. Die For You never leaves that scale. It's basically that chord progression throughout. The bridge of the song will kind of like, it'll go into, I think they substitute the chord with a different kind of voicing for the C sharp minor chord or something like that. But it doesn't modulate as far as I remember. So it's just one scale throughout. E major, C sharp minor, either or. They use the same notes. So those are like some examples. We've done a bunch of examples actually, so this has been kind of fun. Again, feel free to ask questions in the chat if you need to. So where can we take this? Like, how can you use this stuff? Since we've talked about scales, we talked about modes, chords from the modes, making melodies over the scales and modes. You can take it a lot of directions. And actually one thing that I tell people is like, you should definitely keep making music where you're testing out not just a scale, but like all the different moves you can do in that scale or that mode, or that key. If you're playing keyboards, it's going to make you a better keyboard player just naturally, and you have the satisfaction of making music at the same time, which is arguably even a better way to learn than just kind of doing like rote practicing of scales on the keyboard, right? So that's a huge thing. And when you're making tracks, you could actually like set yourself up with a couple of starting rules. I call them starting because it's like, oh my gosh, the lights it's so dark in here. All right. I call it starting rules because it's like you might take those rules and then run with it and go a different direction. So hold on a second. I'm just going to turn on the lights because this looks terrible. I'll be right back. Hold on. All right, cool. There we go. Very professional production here. So, yeah, what was I saying again? You could literally write down a scale, a mode, a chord progression, start a track with it, and that's like your starting rules. So a lot of times when you're being creative, like you might go off in another direction, and that's okay. Like you start with, I'm going to write something in Mixolydian, and then it's like, but I don't even know where I went after that. I went in some other direction. That's okay. Because creativity is kind of like digression. You're digressing a lot of times. You might break away from the plan. That's normal. So, but having that mindset of like, I'm going to explore a scale or a chord, you're going to start to learn so much about, and also studying actual songs out there that someone else wrote, right? You're going to learn so much about actually how to write melodies. Because drums there's so many secrets to having good drums. I just did a tutorial all about drums. So drums are like, to get great at drums, it's all the sound design and the plugins and understanding syncopation and getting good sounds, good sample packs, learning how to use loops, learning how to warp loops properly, overdubbing, reverse sounds, learning different genres, their rhythmic differences, even going a little bit further down the rabbit hole with like time signatures and triplets and different kinds of odd groupings, all that stuff, right? True. But drums are in some ways pretty accessible, pretty easy. You go into FL Studio and you can just click on the channel rack and you'll make a drum beat, right? Which is great. But then everyone always gets kind of like stumped with the melody stuff, like the musicality stuff. So I'm trying today to like give you guys an overview, give you like, hey, this is a way you can think about it, especially if the theory has always felt kind of useless to you. Like music theory, it's its own little language, but it's not it's not algebra 2. It's real stuff. You can really use it. So yeah, so like how would you practice it? You could do drills, in this world of like making your own music. There's a lot of ways to do it. So far today, we've done a pretty typical way, right? We made chords from a scale sequence based on a scale. And then we tried to like write notes using the scale over those chords. And, that's super useful. Of course, I wanted to kind of go like a little bit deeper today into this world. So how we take it further, it's usually in layers. So like if you're practicing this on your own, you could start with chords, then you create a melody, and then where I would say like go further with it. And this is a lot further. So this might even, you could argue that some of this is unnecessary or too much or overproducing or being a maximalist. Sometimes I'll do songs where there's a ton of stuff going on, even too much, and I gotta delete stuff before I put my vocal in. I'm guilty of that. So like, you can be overly maximalist about it, but layering is the key. Layering is the key, right? So let me give you an example. We have this chord here. I'm going to turn some stuff back on. Let's just get some music going because we can just like jump right in with whatever we got right here. I'm going to have to print out a few things just to save CPU because my computer's kind of old. I'm not going to lie. So here's our lo-fi kind of thing, right? This layer. We got this lo-fi vibe, right? This is like a higher melody. This is already pretty high in pitch for this synth sound. Like I would have trouble singing that with my own voice, right? But essentially the idea here is, it's a lot easier to visualize this in FL because you can see things stacked together, right? But just to be fast, we're just gonna do it. So like, here's the chords. There's some movement going on up here. So like whenever the notes are kind of lined up, that's sort of like, think of it like you're playing. Like all your chords are kind of like on a painting, that's like the background color, right? And then the stuff that's moving around, arguably this area and definitely this area, those are the lines, right? In that musical painting. Because notice it's just moving around. It's not stacking. It's not as polyphonic in its approach as this thing. So I know I'm throwing around some fancy words. Bear with me, but so there you go. So okay, that's a melody over chords. Sweet. You can take it further. One of the easiest ways to do it. Let me just grab a sound. What's this sound? Is to go higher in pitch, but more simple in the line. So pitch can distract the listener, and you want to think about what the listener's focusing on. But layers oftentimes make just a better sounding beat, a better sounding track, a more interesting, rich production, right? So in this case, I know I've got D minor, G7, C major. I might go ahead and put, I don't know, like F, B, E, but super high in pitch and super far away. And this would be like a really high top line melody that's super simple, super spacey, and might even be mixed kind of lower. But that's sort of like my counter melody, right? That's like the super high melody, and that's a much higher layer. I could probably play that in. Oh, sorry. I think this. Let's see. I might actually start with E just because it sounds good over the minor 9. So you have this. It's not the most ideal sound because it's kind of like a brass sound. But we just put this up an octave. And I'll play it just with the piano. And I want that to land over that chord, right? So we got to get it over there. There we go. That sounds more like it. So like, all right, it's matching up now, right? So here we go. It's high, and I'm going to drown it out. So it's like kind of settled in there. Right there. So I'm kind of mixing a little bit, but just bear with me. Just kind of get that a little hotter. So you see what I'm saying? I made like a super high melody on top of the melody. So the melody in pink, that's my main melody. The melody in yellow is like the super high melody. And it's not complicated, right? Because I'm not trying to distract the listener from that. I'm trying to create richness because it's like high in pitch and it's got a different sound, right, than the piano or the main synth sound. So it's different in pitch, difference in timbre or tone. And like all these things, like if you go to school and you study orchestration, you can teach yourself all this stuff, by the way. I'm basically taking like, I don't want to cuss. I'm taking a, what's the other way to say this? I'm taking the faux way of orchestration. This is not good voice leading. This is not counterpoint. This is not following SATB rules. This is just taking the idea of variation of pitch and timbre and then, sound design and mixing. And it makes a more rich sound. If you start with 3 layers of instrumentation over your drums, you will have so much fun with this. I'm telling you, this is the key right here. If you go to 4 and 5 layers, it gets more and more crowded. So you have to be more and more subtle. This is just my experience, in my opinion. But what's great about it is when you're making a track and you're creating these original ideas for yourself, if you go and you take it as far as you can, when you finally do get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm going to add bass. If you add bass at the very end, it's like the icing on the cake, right? Because the bass frequencies are going to be lower in pitch, lower in frequencies. All the body and depth and power and command of the track is going to come through, and it happens at the very end. So you've made your musical idea as rich and syncopated and balanced and all those things, and then you add your bass and you're off to the races. You got a track that is way more self-aware musically than anything, not you, but like just the hypothetical you has ever done. And I only say that because I've taught this to students over and over and over again over years, literally. I'm not kidding. I've been teaching music production before the lockdown, before the pandemic. And this is the vibe. This is how it happens. If you just kind of do a little bit of the theory, it's going to give you more options. You're not going to be bumping around in the dark as much. So that's kind of where it comes from. I know, Mishka, I'm trying. I see your comment, Mishka. I don't know if we're on the same time right now, but yeah, I'm trying with these settings, man. It's I'm not sure what's going on. I think if it's sounding good for you, then we'll keep rolling. So yeah, and the VOD, hopefully the VOD doesn't get messed up. This might not work today. This is honestly too, like, I wrote out a list of ideas while I was in I work at a recording studio out of my house, and it was such a quiet day today. But like, I just wrote down this stuff, and I'm realizing now as I talk about it that this is so all over the place. Like, this is so everything, but I kind of like that sometimes. Because then maybe people have questions based on what they're thinking or how they're discovering music. So feel free to ask questions. I don't care at all. Or comment, an opinion, whatever. So yeah, we got the 3 layers here, and then we just go to bass. I'm in Ableton today. I can do an FL Studio stream. In fact, I want to do more FL Studio because I love it. I think FL's great. I'm also going to start doing content on Bitwig. I don't know if anyone's heard of that DAW. It's crazy. It is such an amazing DAW. Ableton's my personal favorite, just because it's like, Ableton is crazy how fast I am on here now, just from doing it all throughout the lockdown and everything. But I started on Pro Tools, believe it or not, and it blew up my computer too many times, so I went to Ableton. And I've got tons of students that do FL because they do beats. They're like hardcore into beat making and making money from beats. So I do FL Studio as well, but I want to do Bitwig as well too, because Bitwig is crazy. Bitwig is amazing. So like, okay, what are we doing? I know, and I'm also like, I'm super tired, guys, so I apologize if I'm just like, my brain is not working too well today. And I was gonna do the stream tomorrow, but I'm trying to like take care of myself and work out and lift weights again, and I think I'm gonna be dead tomorrow. So, yeah. So we've got wavetable here for the bass. I'm just gonna make a Reese. I did this in the last stream, and like, I'll do it here and just talk about how I do it. I like Reese's, like, I like Reese, not the candy. I like the Reese bass because it's so simple to make, and like wavetable is so much more simple than like Citrus and FL. It's crazy, but there's nothing wrong with it too. Like, we could do Citrus someday as well. I'm just taking 2 oscillators. I'm just getting something that's like kind of subby sine kind of sounding. Filter it down. Keep the sustain high so it's really strong sounding. Again, low pitch. And then I turn on the unison, shimmer. Now it's super stereofied. And then if you want to take it a step further, I have a whole video on wavetable, by the way. I have like a wavetable tutorial that's like 20 minutes and it goes into like crazy pads. If you're on Ableton, you want to make crazy stuff with Wavetable. I've got some long content on that, but I'm just going to tag it to this envelope so the filter moves when I hit the key, and then I just kind of tune it. So it's going to have a little bit of attitude, right? But then it basically goes down into like below 100 range, like a bass would. And then we just kind of lay it in. The Reese might be a little too flubby for this sound, but whatever. Just get some bass frequencies in there, right? Okay. Also, another tip, quantize settings in Ableton have end turned on, because you want that to actually quantize the ends of your notes when you're using bass. So you have to sit there, and if you play something long, and you don't have to go and like fix the tails of the notes as well. That's pretty huge. Let me throw a limiter on this because this is getting loud. And then just to make sure like everything's not too hot, I just kind of like take this and I like pull it down like 6 dB. So now I'm below, but I can like bring the heat back like that. Because most of the time, like, you're gonna be too hot, especially if you're using drum samples. Like everything that we do in samples, we always limit it. So everything's at 0. So it's probably going to be hot. And I did a tutorial on like Ableton Trap, and it tends to make people's eyes glaze over, but it's really important because it like, you don't want to have these like weird inner sample peaks, like distortion when you try to bounce your track. Yeah. So it's pretty huge sounding. I might even make it more low key, like just take more of the top off here. So this is a sub thing. If you're on, you know, if you're on laptop or cell phone, you might not be able to hear it. There you go. And you can kind of like go from there. In fact, you know what? Just to have fun with it, I'm gonna do a couple, and then I might have to end the stream because I'm getting pretty hungry. Yeah, feel free to let me know too if the stream is still a little bit, if you have buffering. If the stream keeps buffering on you, let me know, because that's, I think, a sign that my settings, I changed my settings like 5 times. I'm not sure even what I have right now, but just let me know. You know, it might not really be your internet connection, it might be me. So I want to make sure I've got the right settings. Okay, so this is where things get interesting, right? Because if I was going to actually organize this, I would say I started with chords. I built like kind of a sparser melody because the chord progression is kind of faster. There's not as much room, right, for syncopation. Then I have an even higher counter melody. I would call this a counter melody. Some people might get upset at me using that word. I call it counter because it's like extra. And then my bass. So we'll call this chords, melody, or we'll say main melody. It's kind of like a musical game. Counter melody and bass. And like, you know, You might hear people talk about soprano, alto, tenor, bass writing, SATB. That's what, and take like a music theory class in high school or college, they go into all that. Well, this would be probably the alto or the violas, right? So this is like the mid range. And then like the counter melody in this case is like the soprano. It's like the super soprano. And the main melody is like, the tenor or whatever. I'm butchering this, I know. But you have kind of like high, mid, low, right? So in terms of like pitch and function, so like, is it related to 4-part writing? No, it's not. I know I'm going to like, I'm going to piss people off describing it this way, but like, it's a way of thinking about it, right? It's a spectrum of pitch, of function, of musical function. It creates a rich sound with the drums. So I'm being a little bit ambitious today. I'm like trying to just give you the whole spill just for fun. If this is like insanely confusing, just let me know. I know it kind of is, but all right. So let's run with it. I want to do one more with chords. I'll take my drums, I'll carry them over. This is why this stuff is kind of fun though, because once we have our instruments, we can go crazy, and you can give me suggestions. Hop in chat, give me chords, give me a scale, give me whatever, and I'll just work it out. I'm not the best at this stuff, but we can kind of follow through together and just do it together, and you can see the stuff in action and go run to your DAW and go for it. A lot of this honestly is just repetition. I'm going to go back to the C minor scale. Let's see here. Oh, I need an instrument. That's right. I'm going to start with chords again. Nope, that's not what we want. Hold on. Go the same sequence as before, so then we'll throw in this one. That's too high. I gotta leave room for the really high one. Okay, now I gotta go much higher. I'm gonna go super high. And let's see what we got. That's not too good. It's kind of clashing a little bit with the other melody. So I'll solo both melodies. That's too high. So let's bring this down an octave because they're still clashing with each other. It sort of works. I'm not too happy with the way the sound works now in this synth, so kind of just pay attention mostly to pitch for this purpose of this, because we're just kind of throwing it together to see what happens. It's not bad though, it's not terrible. It's kind of squeaky up there, but whatever, we're just trying stuff. And then bass. I know I'm going C minor, A flat. I'll lay that in. I gotta use different notes for everything. right, so it's not amazing, but you get the idea. We're just throwing stuff together. You don't have to have the bass be straight lines. You don't have to have the bass. Uh, ooh, it's really storming outside. Um, you don't have to have the bass uh, be the root notes either. Okay, so now we'll get a little more fancy with it. Right? You can have the bass notes instead of being the one, it could be the flat 3 or the 5, or the 3rd or the 5th. Those are called inversions. So you ever heard that term thrown around? I might do. Well, let me fix this. I might do, instead of A flat, I could stay on C because that's the 3rd to A flat, and it sounds cool. Notice the bass note could move to A flat, but it's also stable at C because it's the 3rd to the A flat major chord. A lot of times in gospel, they take the 5th of the chord. So like I would take maybe the E flat. Maybe I'll drop down to it. It's very low. I might not be able to hear that at all. I might lose power, by the way, so just a heads up. It's that time of the year. Almost that time of the year. I like that E flat over the A flat major 7. So not technically going to the root note over the A flat chord. That's the inversion. There's a lot of like trap hip hop songs where, you know, the inversions or like what the 808 is doing is not really the root note per the chords. It's kind of doing its own thing that's more based on the rhythm and the feel and the vibe and the energy and the flow of the track. And there's a lot of power to that. So you might even see, like, I've seen some Lil Uzi Vert tunes where we went into the bass. And the bass line, I don't think it was Tour Life. I'm not too sure. But the bass actually was in like a different scale than the main melody was. But it just kind of vibrated a cool way, right? So like they just went with it. I can't remember what it was. It might have been Louis Vert song. I'm not too sure. But yeah, with 808s, it's a little bit different. But another thing about that is the 808, a lot of times people give me a track and they want feedback and they're like, it sounds all right, but I'm not sure about the bass. And usually it's just they have an 808 sample that wasn't actually set to C or was labeled with the wrong note or whatever. You can hear the thunder probably. And it just like, it's just out of tune. So they could just have the root of their song. As long as they know the root of their key, they just put their 808 at that key, they'd be fine. Whenever we do that to their songs, they immediately notice a huge difference. Everything feels more unified. And it's usually something as simple as that, just the root, right? So let's try another one. My power might go out, so I'm just warning you guys, but because it's going nuts outside right now. But we'll try one more, and then I'll just end the stream. Because I don't know, it's like going crazy outside right now. So like we did everything today with chords. It was just chords, building from the chords, right? So then I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say maybe I don't have chords. Maybe I just have melody. And as a music producer, right? Because we're going a little bit deep today. You got to be able to do this. A singer comes up to you and they are like, oh, I got a melody I was singing in the car on the way here, and they play it for you on their phone. If you can sit there and like play the chords to their melody that they give you and basically harmonize chords for that melody, that's how like people look at you and they're like, oh my gosh, how'd that just happen? That was amazing. But it's not magic. I'm not going to tell you, I don't know how I do it. I just do it. There's a way to do it. There's a way to do it. You can practice it. You can use repetition. You can get better and faster, and just become more yourself with it, with that technique. So let's say main melody is our singer, just hypothetically, right? And they go ahead and they sing. I'm just gonna play whatever. It might be crappy, but who cares? Oh, I need my metronome. Now, does that sound simple? Yeah, it's pretty simple. Probably the reason why is because when someone actually sings a melody and we're not playing it instrumentally, it's going to be like not moving around as much, because vocally we don't really do that. We can. There's artists out there like Kate Bush, who has melodies that are just like super interesting. But generally the melody's not going to move as much when it's from the singer, right? So I'm looking at that. You look at the notes, F, G, C, F, G. Okay. Well, as long as you're getting used to using triads and you're thinking about not just what the roots, but what the thirds and fifths are of a chord, particularly thirds, it's going to come in handy a lot. So for our purposes, I might look at this and say, man, I could use an E flat major over this, right? Because E flat major, the middle third of that is G. I see a lot of G in here. It's kind of spending a lot of time on G. I might go E flat major, A flat major 7. So it might give it a sweeter vibe, but it's gonna work. All right, I need to make sure I'm in the right spot. Sorry. There we go. Let me bring my drums over too. Makes it more fun. That's pretty sweet sounding, right? It's very kind of melancholic. That's what I played just now. All right. So, but then you say, you're like, okay, well, I just used thirds to make that happen. So what if I used fifths? Well, perfect fifth of C minor is G. Perfect fifth of C is F minor. So let's just change the chords. Our singer's still doing her thing, but we're doing something different. It's slightly different. Let me try that again, sorry. Now I'm doing a little bit of melody stuff going on there too, right? So we can get rid of that just for the purpose of like keeping things kind of example based. Man, the power did not go out. The power did not go out. What do I do different with main melodies as opposed to bass melodies? That's a great question. That's not a dumb question at all. That's a great question. If I understand your correction correctly, you'll notice I'm starting with I was starting with chords that I did the melody. The melody's in pink. Let's just call the main melodies in pink on the screen. So you got that as your main, and then you have the chords. If you did bass, like if you started with bass, and a lot of people do, Like in this context, I'm just kind of doing like a big fat Reese bass or like an 808 synth bass type thing, whatever. It's kind of like a big like sound, right? But like, what about pop? What about funk? What about house, which has a lot more syncopation and movement in the bass? Might even be a bass guitar riff, right, on the bass guitar. Then you're going to harmonize it in a very similar way. So that's not a dumb question at all, right? I'm just taking a singer that's singing kind of vocal oriented notes in terms of their pitch, lower pitch for the bass note. It's going to be a similar approach. So I love that question, actually. That's a great question. So, okay, we went here real quick. I'm just going to be like, okay, super high thing, throw that on. Super simple, right? I'm not trying to get in the way of my singer. I'm trying to add layers. And then the bass comes in here. Remember, I did C minor to F minor, so I just lay it in. A little bit of movement there. So you can see that. I just like to kind of fall like boom, boom to the F. All right, cool. Let's start with a bass line. I'm going to try to find a sound real quick. Let me just take care of my CPU here real quick. They can. Yeah, your bass notes can clash. They can, and it always depends. It always depends. Sometimes even the clash, like you heard what I did there. I mean, it kind of had this falling effect. Was the B flat or A sharp, was that part of C minor? Well, C minor 7 chord for sure, has a B flat in it, but it's like lower. It's not in the C minor triad, C, E flat, G. So like for a moment, I was kind of breaking away from C minor, but it kind of worked. You know, it didn't sound too weird. So yeah, bass a lot of times is not going to move as much, but it depends, right? It depends on the style, like house and funk, pop music, a lot of the Charlie Puth stuff. Again, like the tutorial I did on drums, I talked about towards the end of the video, like trying out other genres or listening to other genres as a music producer. You might not be a fan of BTS, but it's useful to listen to their music and be like, okay, what was that? Well, how'd they do that? You know, like, am I a fan of BTS? No, but like you can hear like how they're using bass. Listen to any song and be like, what's the bass doing? Can I hear it? What's the lowest tone that I hear? And can I find it on my guitar? Can I find it on my piano? Can I sing it? If you can sing it, you don't even need an instrument. You don't need to know how to play an instrument. Vocalize as much as you can. But the bass in a lot of genres like hip hop doesn't necessarily move around as much. If you tie the bass to the kick, it might be more syncopated because it's going to hit every time the kick hits. Like a lot of times they like to marry the 808 with the kick. So that might be an example. Yeah, jumping octaves on roots. It makes sense. I'm not a huge fan of jumping octaves. That's just my opinion. I'm not a huge fan of jumping octaves. If it's like in drill, when you want to get that sweeping sound, it's great. A lot of times they jump like 2 or 3 octaves and the bass goes way up there, especially on like the 4th bar of a 4-bar phrase. That's very typical in drill. But like, yeah, to be honest, I keep the bass kind of simple. I grew up as a bass player, so I started playing bass when I was 10, and it's my original instrument. When I play a bass guitar into any one of my own songs, it's the last thing that happens on the recording, happens after the vocals, and it's also the most simple. I do that on purpose because when I add fills on the bass guitar, which is way easier to figure out fills, right? You could overplay on the bass guitar way more easily. I tend to like keep it more simple. And I've been in situations with producers that are just way, they're older than me, way more successful than me. And they would ask me to do the bass at the very end. And we would always come up with all these things. Oh, go to the inversion, go up higher, then go back down low on the bass guitar. And then it's like, but then I would be like, it sounds good. Can we just do, they would ask me, I wouldn't say this. They'd be like, can you just do a pass where you just play like how it feels? And I would play something. It would inevitably be more simple and we would all like it more. So we would spend like an hour and a half, like trying to come up with the most complex bass guitar part. This is for like pop. And then we would take the more simple one that I did in like 2 passes. Jumping octaves is not necessary. You can keep it more simple, but it also depends on the genre, Jesse. It depends on the genre. Because like, and again, you can break as many rules as you want. But like hip hop, the bass is kind of more about power and not a lot of syncopation or fancy stuff harmonically. It's like, it's the foundation. It's the thing that's going to rattle the car. It's not really there to, do like a tons of riffs and stuff. In house music, that's a different conversation. House is awesome for that. So I'm not an expert in all these things, but house definitely has some syncopated bass. The bass is doing some stuff. So, but then, if you don't really listen to house or you haven't been interested in listening to house, maybe check out house because you might kind of pick up some ideas from there, especially if you're doing a different genre than that. That's a great question though, and like a way you could practice with bass is like you could lay down your bass line. Like, oh, where's my sound? Did I turn it off? Oh, I did. So let's say I turn on just metronome and I just have a bass line and it's going to be kind of busy. So let's just be busy. I'm going to do drums though, just to put things in context. So we're still in the trap world. Again, genre is such a big part of this stuff, but okay, there's a bass line that's like moving, all right? So just gonna fix it a little bit. So that's doing a bunch of stuff now, right? And the funny thing is it can, because nothing's in the way. So you could do more with it, Like I would love to start a track just like this. And I'm not even hearing like, I'm hearing something just kind of like spacey and weird coming up over the top. Like I want the ear to focus on that bass line. You know what I'm saying? I want the ear to be on the bass line because the bass line is cool. So I got this stuff up top. It's not doing a lot. Boom. So like it's all relative, you know what I mean? It's all relative. My ear is communicating with that bass. For you, Jesse, if you're still there, you could start with a bass line like that. Make a bass line, have fun with it, and then make your bass line when you have drums. So start drums, bass, and then think about when you add to it, you want the bass to still be the star of the show. You know what I'm saying? Again, it's like, it's relative, man. Everything's relative. Like, I don't want to get in the way of that bass. I could add chords, I could add main melody, but if I did it as a producer, I'm thinking, okay, but I don't want to distract the listener from my sick bass line. So we could try. I just don't want to like distract him, you know what I'm saying? Like that's already too much. Like in my head, I'm like, all right, well, let's mix that a little bit. That's also a clashing note. Let's get out of the D natural. That's near half step. We're going to just go C, or even E. I think we had a little hiccup. Uh-oh. I think it crashed again. Yeah, I do the bass line at the end too. Um, I'm sorry, I think the stream crashed again. I'm not sure what's going on, but yeah, I do the bass line at the end too. And you notice like now we're on the polar opposites. So we started with bass line and then everything kind of works. We're trying to work around that bass line. Like we want the ear to enjoy the bass line. So I'm just backing it up and I can keep layering, but I'm always kind of approaching the notes from that philosophy. So here we have the piano. And this is also like harmonizing to the bass line. This is kind of another topic because as opposed to harmonizing from a melody, like a singer's melody, the bass line is going to have more movement. So you go and you say to yourself, well, I don't really know what chords I would put over that bass line because look at all these notes on the page. A secret is look at where the ear is resolving to within that particular moment in time. So I have 2 bars. I have E flat or D sharp here for the majority of that time. So my ear is gravitating towards E flat and then it gravitates to C and arguably E flat on the very end of the phrase, right? So then I go in with my chords and I'm like, okay. Sorry. I don't know if you guys can hear the thunder in the background, but it's a miracle that we're still online right now. I mean, it's just kind of clouding things up. Maybe I'll get a higher piano or just keep it super simple. But even that, like, I don't really need that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just kind of busy. I might turn that really down in the mix because what the piano's really great at is adding like mids, mids, and low mids. So it's going to add some warmth and body. If I take it out, it scoops. It's nice and clean and open. And now it's filled in. So here we'll A-B it again. Without. With. So like you can barely hear it until it's gone or it's in because it's like filling in. I have to take that approach because the mid-range is now getting really competitive. So I want my bass line to be the star of the show. So that's that thing. Like, it's probably the thing that I like to leave off with, which is to say that when you start getting into these scales and modes, like you can take your melody writing and just switch up your approach. You might find that you typically start with chords and then you build a melody and then you build your drums and then you build your bass. It might take you out of your comfort zone, but if you start somewhere else in the process, you'll have a different result. Because your brain is like, not to get scientific, but your brain is always reacting. Like our brains just react to stuff constantly. Like we're constantly judging, right? So when you hear something as a producer, you're thinking, okay, and then this, and then this, and you're like stacking the things, right? It's the synthesis of ideas. If you start at a different point, you're going to practice your music theory a different way. You're going to practice your arranging a different way. You're going to practice a style a different way. You're going to get a different result and you'll be better off for it. So that's really what I kind of want to like kind of get into in this stream. I apologize for the technical difficulties. It's a little bit imperfect. It's going to improve though, because I want to do more streams like this in the future. I think it's a fun way to like answer questions and like have fun with content, you know. I do a lot of shorts on this channel. If you're new to this channel, there's shorts and long tutorials. I think a lot of people miss the long tutorials. So if you're looking for something more in depth and more edited, I can't say that word, but yeah, go ahead and check that out. Um, and yeah, I'll probably leave it there just because I'm pretty wiped. I didn't really have too much energy to go like 3 or 4 hours, you know. But I hope this was interesting for you guys. Feel free to hit the subscribe button, like. That really supports the channel. If you like a video, that really goes a long way. Also, if you need samples, I'm running a flash sale. So the link in the description below is to my own kind of library of sounds, royalty free, 100% royalty free. You can check that out. Everything there. There's tons of stuff there to check out if you're new to the channel. And I'm running a flash sale, 15% off for April Fools. But yeah, 15% off everything. So many sounds in there for you guys. So feel free to dig into that, invest in some new sounds. And yeah, I'll catch y'all on the next one. Hopefully this stream ends when I click the button, but I don't know. So I apologize if it's kind of crazy. Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Have a good one. Thanks for stopping by, man. Thanks for stopping by. All right, I'm going to sign off, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend. I hope that this inspired some of you, and yeah, have fun making music. I'll catch y'all later. I don't have a stream outro, so you know what? We're going to be very unceremonious about it. Have a good one, everyone. Take care.